Hello, and welcome to Off the Fence, a podcast where we deconstruct difficult decision making to try to figure out what keeps us stuck, and more importantly, how do we get unstuck? I'm your host, Karen Covey, a former divorce lawyer, mediator, and arbitrator turned coach, author, and entrepreneur. With me today, I have the pleasure of speaking with another entrepreneur, Karlin Clayton. Karlin is a certified leadership, executive, and career coach who brings over 20 years of corporate talent development and people leader experience to her coaching relationships and organizational initiatives. During her tenure as an HR executive, she worked with all levels of leaders to build skill and enhance effectiveness through growth oriented goal setting and achievement. She has deep experience in managing cross functional relationships and large scale programs. As a coach, Karlin brings an empathetic, strength based approach to meet people where they are, supporting them in taking the small steps that will lead to the bold changes and improvements that they want to make. Karlin, welcome to the show.
Thank you, Karen.
And I am so excited to have you and talk about all things transformation and change and identity. And there's a million different directions I want to go with this conversation. But let's start, if you don't mind, with your own personal journey. I know you have some experience with divorce, you have some experience with going from corporate to your own gig. Can you tell me a little bit about those?
Yeah, so I was married for many years, and unfortunately it did end up in a divorce. And so I know what it's like to go through that experience and to bring my children through that experience. And I've been through job loss, and I've been through hard things, and I think that helps me relate to my clients who have also been through hard things, because there are better things waiting for us on the other side.
Yeah, I think that's an important message for people to hear. Although when you're in the midst of it, it's a hard message to hear because you don't really believe it. So what would you say to somebody who is just in the beginning of some major transitional change, whether that's starting a business, losing a job, losing a spouse, divorcing a spouse, whatever the transition, and everything looks dark? What would you say to that person to start? How can they start?
So I'm not going to paint a picture that, it's easy. People people say to you, "Oh, just stay strong. Oh, you can get through anything." And when you're in it, it doesn't feel that way. And so when I look back on my own journey and what helped me get to where I am, it's really about resilience. And, there are things there are things in your life that you can control, and there are things that you can't control. And you can't control that you got divorced and that you had that outcome. You can't control that you lost your job, or you had or lost a loved one or something like that. You can control what you do next. You can control the steps that you take to set you on a more positive path. And then, from there, it is recognizing that any bad situation you're in is temporary. But if you can just acknowledge, like, yeah, I have to go through this right now, and it's not any fun, and it's temporary. And so then it's also a matter of starting to be grateful for things beyond just, oh, I have a roof over my head. Oh, I'm it is being grateful for yourself, being grateful for the things and the strengths that you bring. So maybe it's, I'm grateful that I'm a really organized person. I'm exceptional at project management. I am I am grateful that I am fantastic at building relationships and quick rapport, and I know that I can find, I can find more friends, additional another partner, whatever that is. And so I think you know, it's knowing what you can control, what you can't, knowing that anything is temporary, and then charting this path for yourself, having that positive outcome on the other side so that you know where you're going.
That makes a lot of sense, but I want to focus with you on something that we don't talk about a lot, and I think a lot of people don't think about, but it comes up when you're going through something like a divorce or a job loss or a career change, and all of a sudden you feel like you're adrift. Like, you can't even connect with yourself anymore because you identified as I was a wife, I was a mother, I was a, I was a lawyer, doctor, Indian chief, name your profession, right? And now, if that's gone, who am I? What would you say to somebody who's like having those kinds of thoughts?
Again, I've been there and I coach a lot of people who are in that space. Like, but I've always been this person who did this. I've always been the successful business person, or I've always been this, um, I've always been the stay-at-home parent who has just taken care of everything. And now now it's all really different. And so the first thing is, all of those experiences made you who you are today, and that's great. And who are you now? And where do you want to go? What is Karlin 2.0? What is what is this next version of yourself? And I think that a good way to begin that process is to take stock of your values. Identify what are your values today, because what your values are today might be different from what they were 10, 20 years ago when you were starting a new career, getting, newly married or whatever. And so what are your core values now? And are you living those values? And they can be personal values like authenticity, they can be professional values like collaboration, and begin to kind of align yourself to those values and seek out experiences, jobs, and people that align with those values. And then you start to feel this sense of authenticity and you begin to feel who you are. And then, then comes the confidence part. We all tell ourselves these stories. We tell ourselves these stories of who we are and, oh, I'm not good enough, or I can't get that job because it's they're just hiring young people, or the technology is too much, or it'd be too big a change. And so it's time to create a new story, a new narrative for yourself. Start thinking about who you are, where you want to go, and maybe practice that narrative with some friends or family and talking about who you are, and begin to build that muscle of talking about this new version, this sort of 2.0 version of yourself. And
Oh,
I guess a
okay, let me interrupt for just
yeah,
a second and play devil's advocate. All
sure.
right. So you're like, okay, I can think all those thoughts that this is my 2.0 version and blah, blah, blah. But it's true. Nobody wants to hire someone who, used to be a this or is this old or is doesn't have this qualification. Like we all tell ourselves stories. I get that.
Mhm.
But what do you say when you're like, no, but it's true that people don't want to hire someone my age, or they don't want to hire someone who's been out of the workforce X number of years, or who's had this position, or whatever, insert story, right? What do you
Right.
say to those people? How do you help them get over that hurdle?
I guess the first thing I say is, how true is that? I think we have our truth with a capital T, and we have our truth with a little t. How true is it? Again, how do you how do you know that to be true? And yes, is there ageism in the workforce? I see it all the time. And you can't control that. You can control how you show up. Are you adapting? Are you learning new skills? Are you showing up in interviews with not just talking about what you did 20 years ago, but the things that you're doing now and how you're forward thinking? So maybe you talk about, an AI course that you just took, and I've really been thinking about automating workflows, and you show that you're adept and show that you are cutting edge and you're not just resting on your laurels. And there is so much value in a more experienced person coming into an organization. I am seeing in all of the Gallup data lately, manager engagement is down. And when manager engagement goes down, employee engagement goes down. They need strong leaders. They need strong, mature, experienced leaders to come in and help guide these organizations. And you're the one who can do that, and not somebody who's fresh out of college.
I love that. I love the idea that, is there ageism 100%? However, are we also by how we're showing up, what we're bringing to the table, what we're talking about, do we play into that ageism, right?
Mm-hmm.
Do we increase the perception that we're outdated, you know?
Absolutely.
And so, what would you recommend? Let's say somebody has just been downsized because that has been happening a lot lately, especially across the tech industries, to
Yes.
people who had great jobs, but now they're being replaced by AI, or they don't need, the company doesn't need as many people. And now they're cut off, they're adrift, and they're thinking, sheesh, now what? Where can somebody like that start to pull themselves together and to look for what that next chapter is? And whether this applies, whether they've been downsized or just out of the workforce because they were
Right.
taking care of kids, or, insert your reason. But where does a person like that start?
So I think a person like that starts with, first of all, having a pretty clear idea of what it is you want to do. And maybe it's not one thing. You can't go out and talk to people like, oh, yeah, I'm just looking for another job in marketing. That's not clear. That's not specific. So begin to think about, look at your strengths. What are you really good at? What is your professional identity? Where do you want to go? And get really clear at telling that story. Get really clear with your professional pitch. So no matter who you meet and when, you have your two sentences and you are ready to go. And I would say what I'm seeing most now in people who are successful in securing jobs is that they are doing it through their networks. Um, the days of cold applying and you know I'm not saying you can't get a job that way, but the statistics are pretty low because you're out there competing against hundreds of other people for any job. I mean, um I talk to recruiters all the time, and they're like, oh, I had 1,000 applications to that job last week. And I don't mean to I don't mean to paint a bleak picture, but the way people are getting jobs is through their networks. So let's say you're in HR, you join a local HR community and you begin to do that. Reach out to people who you used to work with 1, 2, 3 jobs ago. And again, not just, hey, Susan, I'm looking for another job in project management, but Susan, hey, I want to let you know that I'm looking for work in project management. I know you have experience in this field. I would love to get your input on what you're seeing in the workforce right now and how I might be able to um, share my story. So being super specific about what you're asking for, I think is really, really helpful. And that only comes through values identification, strengths identification, knowing your value proposition, and practicing it all the time.
Yeah, when you talk about network, though, do you just mean your personal network, like in-person network, or is there value to, for example, building a network on LinkedIn, being part of larger groups that maybe are not all local?
I would say definitely look at both. Yeah, there's all kinds of LinkedIn groups. There are virtual chapters of different kinds of professions that you can be a member of. If you're a little bit more looking into, I don't know, maybe doing your own thing. Alignable is a really great resource, and there's groups that way. You can meet people from all over the country. I have so many connections on LinkedIn. I'm constantly talking to people, and I get connected in really interesting ways. And so I would say, yeah, is my neighbor 3 doors down? Does she work for Google? Yeah, she does. And so, so definitely, I'm talking to her about things. And who else? Am I going to a local networking event? Am I going to a virtual networking event? Is it and, who is my target audience? Do I want to always network with people who are just like me, or do I want to work with people who are maybe in other areas where I want to go?
Okay. So, I see that you're starting with a wide net. You start with your own network, but correct me if I'm wrong, but still, unless you get your head in the game and your emotions lined up, you're still going to limit your success. So, in your experience, what are some of the emotional blocks that you see people throwing up that keep them stuck where they are?
Well, I think, as we talked about earlier, definitely those stories that we tell ourselves. I'm not good enough. Why would anyone want to hire me? And we get into these, I don't know, these thought patterns. And I would say that knowing, being self-aware, which is a trait of emotional intelligence, being self-aware of what does trigger me or set me off or make me feel down about myself or not show up, the way that I want to show up. Being really self-aware is the first place to start. It's like, oh, there's that situation. I'm talking to somebody who has a really brusque personality and I don't know what to do. It's okay. It's part of who you are. Acknowledge it, accept it, accept it, and then let it go because it doesn't serve you. It doesn't serve you in to be in a space of swirl. It doesn't serve you to be in a space of being stuck because it doesn't get you where you want to go. And that's really what emotional intelligence is about. It's self-awareness, self-regulation, it's the way that you are able to use your emotions and create relationships and deal with conflict and stress and those sorts of things. And so, um, yeah, acknowledge it, accept it, and let it go and try something new.
Speaking of trying something new, I've heard a lot in the zeitgeist lately about, especially in the world of entrepreneurs, of just, things aren't working the way they used to work. Should I just burn it all down? Is there a way that people can explore something else without burning down, whatever it was that they've spent years building, whether it's a career, a profession, a business, or whatever? Is there a way that you can have it all or start to have it both?
Start to have both. I think that 10, 20 years ago, you had your one job. You, you showed up at work at 8, you went home at 5, and that was kind of what you did. And having something on the side was kind of frowned upon. Oh, you're doing work off the side of your desk. Oh, you're doing something else. That's conflicting. It's not the case anymore. Gig work is what's happening. And so if you are if you're working and you have a job but you're interested in another area, why not volunteer at a different kind of organization? If you're wanting to work in a role where it's more mission driven, why not start volunteering at your local not-for-profit and begin to see how that feels? And maybe you can transition into that. Or maybe I don't know, maybe you start doing some consulting on the side and on the weekends. Maybe you start doing some coaching, or maybe you I don't know, start designing some materials and you sell those on Etsy. I mean, there's all kinds of things that you can do based on whatever your experience and your skill set is. And I think it's so much more common now for people to have multiple things going on. And I think you should embrace it.
You don't think that it makes you desperate or less than?
Not less than, more than. Aren't
Okay.
you, aren't you like more than the sum of your parts? And sure, I mean, there is so much comfort and so much stability in just saying, I'm a senior project manager and I have my stable pay. And so many people want that, and that's okay. It is okay to want that stability and to have those things, but why not do a little bit of experimentation on the side, and or go take a course, go get a new certification, go meet people in a slightly different area and see if that's maybe another direction that you want to go. So maybe it's your main focus and you have one other focus, and then maybe you don't feel scattered. I think it's a little bit of your tolerance for ambiguity.
Yeah, I think, and the reason I ask the question is again to just sort of maybe give voice to what I have heard people think, that it's their own mindset that's getting in the way, that they think that, well, if I do that thing, or if I try this, or if I have a side hustle, it means I'm not successful, or it means I'm not good enough at what I'm doing, or it means whatever kind of crazy story we all make up, because
Hmm.
we all make up stories like that, right? So
Hmm.
how can somebody get past their mindset, the negativity, besides saying, "Oh, just buck up and do it." It's like, are there any tools that you could share with people to help them get out of their own head and just see their situation differently?
Yeah, I think, again, gratitude, having some sort of gratitude practice, I think is highly important. And so you begin to appreciate the more positive things in your life. There's also a positive psychology activity that I call flip it. And it comes out of positive psychology research, and you take your sort of negative viewpoint. I, you know, I'm an old school project manager, and I don't know how to keep up with what's going on and flip that into something more positive. I
Mhm.
have I have years of experience leading highly technical projects, and I bring that experience to help my company be successful.
I love that.
Yeah.
And I've seen there's some people who seem to innately be good at that. Like, I have listened to people tell their story, and and I know their story, and I'm thinking that's different than what but all they're doing is taking the basic facts and spinning them in a
Hmm.
way that builds them up instead of tears them down, right? So is that a skill? Is that something somebody could work on to develop?
Absolutely. Have, everything that positive psychology says is you can work on it, you can build that muscle, and you can increase your level of happiness, increase your level of personal fulfillment just by practicing some of these skills and getting good at them because they become innate. And what's funny is that people change when they talk about change.
How do you mean?
If I talk about I'm a positive person, I have a positive outlook on life, and if I'm saying these things, I'm talking about changing. I am going to change. It's just something about human nature and your consciousness. And yeah, you got to work at it, but you can absolutely do it and you can absolutely build that muscle.
You had me when you said, you know, getting to fulfillment and positivity and joy and personal happiness and that kind of thing. Does all of this, how do those things or the tools that you're teaching, how do they increase your personal fulfillment, not just get you a job? Because that would be really cool if you could get both.
Well, and they kind of they're almost like they all sort of like almost, related, like two sides of the same coin. If I show up into a job interview as a more positive person, I might be more likely to get that job. And so, but yes, can I, do I work with people about getting jobs or maybe being a better leader or whatever it is? But all of those things happen because I am beginning to have a more positive sense of myself. I am beginning to believe that I am strong. I am beginning to believe that I can do hard things. I can move through hard things. That I can transform and be this next great version of myself. So absolutely, the mechanics of finding a job, yeah, any career coach can do that. Where the I- where the really special stuff happens is when you do incorporate increased fulfillment, well-being, and happiness.
Well, yeah, because that sounds like it's where all the juice is, right?
Yeah.
And getting now, mind you, I understand paying the bills is a good thing. Having an income of whatever ilk, whether it's business income, career, like doesn't matter,
Yeah.
but you need money to survive, right? So that's good. But to be able to also transform yourself and change your life,
Mhm.
now that's sounding really interesting.
Yeah, it's powerful because then if you're feeling more empowered or happy or fulfilled, imagine the effect that's going to have on the people around you. Imagine how you can multiply that effect with your children, with your partner, with your coworkers. It's contagious.
That sounds like it. Would the opposite also be true that the negativity that you're around also affect your kids, your coworkers, what have you?
Absolutely. I mean, we've all worked in toxic environments. And you think back
Yeah,
on why. Why did that feel toxic to me? Usually it's because you had a really negative coworker or a negative supervisor that just brought you down, always saw the dark side of things. And I don't mean to say that everything is always sunshine and rainbows and you always have to have positivity because that goes into
right.
toxic positivity, right? But still believing that you can move through things and have a positive attitude about it, and you can solve problems and you can come out better on the other side is a good
Mm-hmm.
place to be.
Well, and the reason I asked the question, I mean, coming at it from the angle of divorce, which is the angle that I tend to come at things, relationships, right?
Mhm.
And people, I mean, divorce is not a particularly positive experience for most people, and most parents are worried about their children. And it's just an interesting thought to think about how their own attitude may be affecting the children negatively. Everybody wants to say, well, it was the divorce or my spouse, or it's those things that are external to us.
Mhm.
And I'm just wondering what your view is on how much our internal state spills out without us even being aware of it.
I think I think it happens a lot. And I think that even if you think your children don't notice, they notice. If you are in constant inner turmoil and if you're not taking care of yourself and if you're not doing some of the hard work to get you to a better place, it doesn't matter if you're not saying the words to them, they know. And then are you creating this dynamic where they're walking on eggshells, or maybe they're not learning themselves how to move to a place of positivity? I think it can have a dramatic effect on your children. And, with my own children, we talk real. And when we're having a bad day, we talk about having a bad day and why. And we're like, yep. And we also talk about the future together, and we talk about getting to a better place and what the three of us have been through together. Because, we went through some rough times. But now we're in so much of a better place. And I think that it's the three of us working together that got us there.
That's awesome. That's I really appreciate that and sharing your story because I think when you're in the thick of it, when you're in the middle of the ugliness, it's hard to believe that
Hmm.
there will be there's a better side, that better days are coming. And you're very much proof that that's true.
I will tell you, the moment that things shifted for me, this was right before I asked for a divorce, was a friend of mine. He said one night when I was kind of sharing some things, he looked at me and he said, Karlin, you deserve to be happy. And I don't know why that night, that person, that resonated with me. And I felt it in my core. And from there on, everything changed. I'm like, yeah, yeah, I do. My children do. And we're gonna figure out how to get through this.
That's amazing. That's really, really awesome. And I think that a lot of people need to hear that, that it's just, and you're not the first person I've heard this from, that, you can hear the same thing over and over and over. It doesn't hit home. And then one day it's just right place, right time, or you're
Yep.
ready to hear it. And all of a sudden, your world shifts, the
Right.
perspective changes. So, I know you work a lot with leaders and, people
Mhm.
who have the perspective and the mindset that it takes to succeed, even when things are not going well. What have you learned from those leaders that you could share with the listeners to help them change their perspective and mindset if they're not in the best place at the moment?
Sure. The strongest, most effective leaders that I know don't go it alone. They know when they need to reach out to their network, whether it's, within their own organization or maybe it's some peers in other organizations. They know when they might need, I don't know, maybe a little bit of advice. Maybe they need to bounce something off someone else. They are not afraid to ask for help, and it's not seen as being, too vulnerable or anything like that. They're just bringing in the right people to help in any given situation. Another thing that strong leaders are very good at is trying something and failing fast and then learning from it and moving on. They don't dwell on this space. Oh, I had this big corporate initiative and it didn't go the way I wanted it to. And and then this person, they don't spend all this time ruminating. They're like, oh, wow, that wasn't the best decision I ever made. Let me let me figure out what happened and let me change and let me do something different next time. And then they just move on. They just don't dwell in this space of rumination. And I really appreciate that about strong leaders.
Yeah, I think that so many of us have the tendency to get stuck in the negative headspace, and then it's just to spiral down, right? It's really hard to pull yourself up out of that once you've been practicing going down the tubes for a very long time, right?
Mhm.
So if somebody feels that, if they're just like, this sucks, life sucks, everything sucks right now, I can't, what can they do? Is there something that they should read or watch or listen to or do, like something to start pulling themselves up so that they can get to that mindset that says, you know what? That thing didn't work, but I'm not done yet. I can go on.
Yeah, There's so many good resources out there. There's so many good resources on positivity and, happiness and those sorts of things. So I would say even just go read a book on the happiness research, because it's not all just like, oh, it's not cheerleading. It is science. It is research based um, activities and things you can do to increase your happiness and to increase your positivity. I will tell you, I'm right now, me personally, I'm getting a lot of value out of Mel Robbins and her podcast and her Let Them um, book. And people think that, let them. And find someone that resonates with you. Find somebody whose message you like, and start kind of following them and seeing what works for you. And hearing other people talk about moving forward and doing positive things, I think it really invigorates me and it really challenges me to change my own thought patterns. And maybe, if I'm in a lower spot, no, I can pull myself out. I know how to do this because I've read these books or watch these podcasts or whatever it is.
But you raise a really important point, which is knowing, having that faith in yourself that, yeah, I can do it. And if it takes reading the books and or listening to the podcasts, I mean, Mel Robbins' Let Them theory is one example. Another good example is Mo Gaudat. He has a whole he's got a book on making, how to make yourself a little bit happier, and he's given a lot of talks. And I mean, there are so many resources available on YouTube, on podcasts,
Yes.
on, but like, so whatever it is, I love your advice to people to go find one of those resources and realize that they have that ability in themselves and they just need
Yes.
to get in touch with it. I guess that would be the best way to put it.
Hmm. Yeah, I mean, we're the experts on ourselves. We we know what makes us tick. We know what makes our heart sing. Like we know. And sometimes we just need a little bit of help to keep us on the course that we know we should be on.
100%. And, in the work that you do, how do you help your clients stay on course? Because I've got to imagine, like every other human on the planet, they have their ups, they have their downs. How do you help them stay the course so that they can create the job or the business or the life that they really want to live?
So first we think about sort of the meta goal. Like what is the big overarching goal? Is it to get a new job or a different job? Is it to be a better leader? Kind of what is the big thing? So that's always the North Star. So you keep that in focus, and then you begin to break down in little incremental steps. What are some ways that get you there? What are some small things that you can do? Because the last thing that you need to add to your life is more overwhelm. So how can you break it down into small things? Oh, I can go work on this certification. Oh, I can go to 3 new networking events over the next 2 weeks. I can research this new job um, path and see what kind of things it takes to even get into that field. Like, and you begin to break it down. So what I do is I serve as an accountability partner. And sometimes I just kind of follow people. They're super motivated and I follow right behind them and just sort of stay there. And sometimes maybe it's a little more guiding, a little more directing, because maybe, I'm not going to tell someone what to do, but if they ask, like, what do you think? Yeah, I'm going to tell them. But it's not, I ask the questions because people have the answers within themselves. And so we just keep on the path. And we work the plan, basically. We work the plan and we always make sure that that plan is in alignment with your values and who you are at your core. And how does it, and then maybe if we're looking at emotional intelligence, how am I leveraging different aspects of my emotional intelligence to stay on course and to stay with this plan?
That makes so much sense. And speaking of initiatives and things that are coming up, what have you got going on for people? Because I know you've always got something.
And it was funny earlier when you said, well, do you feel like, if you have too many things going on that you're showing up as desperate? I'm like, absolutely not, because I always have something going on. Right now, I'm in the final stages of working on a perfect your personal pitch virtual workshop. And I hope to have that ready in about another month or so. And so I think, and that's going to be really going through, not me telling you what to do, but you working through a formula and you doing the work so that at the end of the hour, you have your professional pitch that you can then go and use. So I've got that coming up. I'm also working on a learning lab for HR leaders and how to incorporate AI into what they're doing and be AI leaders in their organization versus people who are taking a back seat. And I expect, and I'm in partnership with another woman to do that. And I think that'll be coming out also within another month. And then I might have some stuff going on with resilience. So,
Ooh, all
so
good stuff.
all good stuff. So I would say the best thing to do, I would, love for anyone to connect with me on LinkedIn. I post all the time and I will be sure to share all of these upcoming things, but I think it's going to be a pretty busy summer.
Yeah, it sounds like it. And for anyone who is watching or listening to this, everything that Karlin just talked about will be all linked up in the show notes. And when you are listening to this, I like to be ahead of the game. So by the time people are hearing this, it's going to be right around the time when all of your stuff is popping. So definitely, if you're interested in learning more, working with Karlin or maybe going to one of her workshops, definitely check her out. Karlin, so should people go to LinkedIn or your website? What's the best place for people to find you?
I like LinkedIn best because that way, if we want to have a conversation, we can. Certainly, you can go to my website and kind of learn more about me. My company is called If Then Coaching and Consulting, and that will be linked, I know, in your show notes. So go to my website, learn some more about me. I'm always happy to have a conversation. I love meeting people and just having a virtual coffee anytime. So if you just want to talk, I would love to have a conversation.
That sounds wonderful. And Karlin, thank you so much for coming and having a conversation with me and sharing your wisdom with all of the listeners and the viewers. I really appreciate it.
Thank you, Karen.
You're welcome. And for those of you who are watching or who are listening, if you enjoyed today's conversation, if you'd like to hear more conversations just like this, do me a big favor. Give this a thumbs up, like, subscribe to the podcast, subscribe to the YouTube channel, and I look forward to talking with you again next time.